the grips started going. There's always a coffee run at 4:00. And they started bringing me, asking what my coffee order was. Nobody else from my department. And so that sort of traveled fast on the set. And so a producer took me aside one day and he said, there's a rumor going around that you're sleeping with all the grips. Bob, I was 55 or 53 years old. The grips were 20. And I said, oh, really? I said, no, what you don't understand. I said, no, they actually want to sleep with my boyfriend. Welcome to Season 2 of the TheKnifeWife Podcast. I'm Suze, here with my husband,
Bob Demarco.
We're professional creatives and entrepreneurs who live, love, and work together. We share our stories to find ourselves in others. P.S. This podcast has little to do with knives. Hey, everybody. Thanks for stopping by the TheKnifeWife again. I really appreciate you listening. I'm here with my partner in crime.
This is Fun Bobby.
It's Fun Bobby, and I'm Suzi something now. Your suggestions would be welcome there. My managers are thinking of a stage name for me. I haven't settled on anything yet, but that will probably determine by the end of the week because we got a lot of things coming and some big press releases and some articles about me. Because at 69, most people do not start doing stand-up comedy, and I guess that's interesting to other people. So I'm glad. Locally, April 8th, I've got a show at National Comedy Theater. April 19th, I'm at Mic Drop in Kearney Mesa. And May 24th, I'll be at the Comedy Store in La Jolla. Not bad, huh? And then on Wednesday nights, I've been going to Insane Brewery and doing the open mic just to have more time in front of an audience because, most comedians my age have been doing it for 20, 40 years, and I've been doing it for 4 months. And so I need more practice. And so I do it there. And last week there were 20 people and 10 dogs. I thought I was doing a dog show, and I love dogs, so that was okay. But so then they're really nice people that own the place. And then later I'll be with Don't Tell Comedy later on in the year, and it's happening. So, and what else? The next thing, a little housekeeping. We're going to be going to video next month, and we'll be on twice a month right now because of it's costly. We're working on advertisers. Once we have those, we'll go to full time, once a week. But for now, it'll be twice a month, and I think that for us will free up a little time, especially for Fun Bobby. He gets to be in the shop more, right, Bob?
Right.
So, what else? We're going to have a home show. For the knife people, we're going to have a home show. I want to call it Wild Thing, but Bob says Into the Wild, which is all natural material from wild animals, correct?
Correct.
They're friendly sourced. They're people who take care of them and pay for the vet bills and whatever, and then when they die of natural causes or whatever, they take the animals and use them. Some of them are for meat, right, for the village people.
They feed villages, yeah. This is South Africa.
Yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah, it's not like the Tiger King here.
Except for the mammoth fossil.
Yeah, well, those were around when you were born, Bob.
I know. I remember seeing them in the zoo.
Are you kidding? You were running around when there were no zoos back then. You were just out there with those woolly mammoths chasing you down the road, or if there was a road. Anyway, so today we have two Bobs, no waiting. We have Bob Demarco, who has had my Bob on his podcast, and he is incredibly knowledgeable in the knife world. So for you knife nuts, we're going to try and keep it to the business of podcasting and some other things and learning about Bob, because that's the fun part to me is learning about people. And he's also an Italian, so, what can I say? I live with one. What's your love language? Food.
Food.
So anyway, let me introduce Bob. Say hello.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Susan, Bob.
You're welcome. I love to have you. I love your personality. I watch not all of your podcasts, but I get a lot of them. And sometimes I'm up late and I turn on your Thursday night one. His podcast, The Knife Junkie, has 38,000 subscribers. That's a lot. He's got a Facebook fan page with 4,000 members. He has knifejunkie.com. A newsletter. He's a YouTube store. I mean, this guy does it all. And I just found out he has a job. So I guess you don't sleep, right, Bob?
Yeah, well, I get 5 hours in a night. It's funny, you mentioned the love language of Italians, and I mentioned before we started going, I've been fasting for 2 days, which for me seems like I've been in the desert for 40 days. So.
Oh, yeah. My Bob would not be doing
I
this.
can't even imagine doing that. Can't even imagine it.
You can't imagine going 2 hours without food. Yeah, you're fasting. So you're a little lightheaded maybe now. Are you allowed to have caffeine in your juice thing? Okay, all right.
I've had plenty, yes.
You've had plenty. I like to hear that kind of talk. So tell us a little bit about Bob growing up, and a little bit about your job history, and where you came from and how you got there.
Well, I grew up right outside of Cleveland in Ohio, and I had a great, I was born in the early 70s, so I had one of those lifestyles that a lot of people that I'm meeting in the knife world these days kind of covet. I was kind of free during the day, and came home at dinner time.
And the lights went on?
Yep, exactly. Rode my bike far afield, and hung out in the woods and did all that stuff. Even though I was in suburbia, there was a different sort of freedom back then.
And now I know why I like you, because I'm from the Chicago suburbs, so we're Midwesterners. Like we bring you a plate of food. We bring you a casserole or a Jello salad.
Yeah,
when you're sick or grieving, or you celebrate something or whatever. We're big on that. So, and I'm not even Italian, so I can't imagine you guys probably make a pot of a pan of lasagna or something. But anyway,
come on, Bobby, the spaghetti's ready. Come on, Bobby. No, it wasn't like that, but
but
yeah.
That.
So I had that sort of life growing up as a kid. And I had grandparents who I knew into my 20s. I was very lucky to know all my grandparents.
Wow.
Into my 20s. And they all were children of the Depression. And with the exception of my father's side, those grandparents grew up in Cleveland. The other side, my mom's side, they were coal miners in Pennsylvania. And my maternal grandpa had that barefoot American boy life growing up in the early 1900s, where, he would jump on a train and go 40 miles and go fishing with his buddies when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad did the same thing. Mm-hmm.
God, I really admire that. I really kind of pine for that, life I never had. But so I think I got my love of knives from my grandpa in a big way,
Yeah, he probably used him a lot. And so, so you grew up there. Did you go to college? I don't know.
Yeah, I went to college for fine art, which...
shake my hand. Me too. That's a waste of money, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm strongly discouraging my daughters from taking my path.
Well, the one thing I will say, if they go to an art school, like there's a couple, there are about 4 in the country, if you go to those art schools and you get an MFA, you might show your work. You might get people to buy your work. But if you don't go to those 4 schools, I'm not going to name their names, let the artists find out. Go to a university for an art degree, you might as well just burn your parents' money. So
my goodness, yep, that's true. When I went, it wasn't so much like that, but it is for certain now. And I went to grad school. I got an MFA. From the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts.
Wow.
The first art school in this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this art school, great place. I don't mean to run it down with that tone of voice. But they eschewed photography. There was no anything but printmaking.
And I'm a master printmaker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I am. You can come up and see my etchings, and that's what you get.
I've heard that line before.
Yeah. Anyway, so you went there for your MFA. Wow. No wonder I resonate with you so much.
I think knives and martial arts. I've been a martial artist since my early 20s, which is now 30 some odd years. I've been doing martial arts. I think.
What kind of martial arts?
It started with American Kempo karate, and then about 25 years ago or so, it turned into Jeet Kune Do. I started doing Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do. Well, actually, Jeet Kune Do concepts. That broke up into 2 political factions.
Yes.
I'm in the more progressive faction of that, if you will. That's about as progressive as I get. But Jeet Kune Do takes a lot of cues from Filipino martial arts, and we all know that the Filipinos in the Philippines, it's a very blade-heavy culture, and so I naturally took to that. But I was really into knives from a very early age. And I think, I've talked about this a lot on my show with various people,
Mm-hmm.
and I get input from a lot of others. But I think it has to do with two things. One, a sense of self-reliance. The man or woman with a knife on his or her hip can do anything, or they can at least start the process right there because they have a knife on them. But also it's a weapon. And, that plays into the more martial aspect, the more, I can be a protector, provider kind of thing. So for me, I think from a very early age, I was impressionable. I watched Land of the Lost. I watched Daniel Boone and all those shows in the 70s, and all the men had knives on their hips. I think that was
I
something
know.
like,
In Gunsmoke, they had knives in their pockets, and I was like, and I wanted a pocket knife, but my father was a safety engineer, so we weren't going to have a. No. We had butter knives that sliced anything else in our house. There was nothing sharp. But, he was Mr. Captain Safety, as I called him. But anyway, yeah, I was always fascinated. I always wanted a pocket knife. We'd stop at like Stuckey's. Remember those roadside places?
now I've heard of Stuckey's,
Okay,
but I've never.
all right. So we'd stop there, and they'd have knives with everybody's names on the handle. They were terrible knives. But they always had them with my name on them, Suzi. And I was like, look, I could get a knife with my name on it. Never happened. Now, not until I met Bob did I get my own.
And you
So.
got one of the best out there.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
well, I don't know. He's kind of a hack, but yeah, he's not bad. Yeah, no, I really, in my movie life, one day I took out, he made me a knife to work with on set when I was working on this horse show, and they needed to cut open a bag of feed, and so the directors and producers had seen that I carried this sort of fancy pocket knife on set, and they said, we want that knife, not the stupid ones props bought us. We don't want a Swiss Army knife or whatever. We want one of those, whatever the kind is. So, I had to give my knife for the rest of the season to the show, and then they gave it back. Props gave it back to me. And so, yeah, where's that Susan Wardrobe girl? She's got a really cool knife. And,
so you were in wardrobe. Okay.
I was wardrobe, yeah, costume. And that's a long story. But and then it's a funny story for Bob. The grips started going. There's always a coffee run at 4:00 or halfway through the day because we're working long hours, and they started bringing me, asking what my coffee order was, and nobody else from my department, and so that sort of traveled fast on the set, and so a producer took me aside one day and he said, there's a rumor going around that you're sleeping with all the grips. Bob, I was 55 or 53 years old. The grips were 20. And I said, oh, really? I said, no, what you don't understand, I used to call them piano key teeth in my mind, these big capped. He was a cap-tooth bugger, our stunt guy called him. Anyway, I won't say his name, but those of you in the movies, you know who I mean. And so I said, no, they actually want to sleep with my boyfriend. Bob and I weren't married yet. And he's like, what? He had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, go ask the best boy, if he knows who my husband is. And in fact, Bob made him a machete, right, Bob?
Yeah, it was a bush knife, actually.
Yeah, and then you made neck knives for the whole department. Well, and that was a long time ago. Now you wouldn't be getting those. But anyway, so
they had no idea what they were getting either.
Oh, they did know. Oh, no. They all brought me coffee. They knew what they were getting. They, as I said, they wanted Bob. They didn't want me. Okay. Like many people try to go through me to get to Bob. In fact, that's a 10-time daily occurrence. So, but that's another story. So anyway, okay. So you always were interested in knives, but you got an MFA. And then what did you do after you got an MFA? What most people do, they get jobs.
Yeah, exactly. I went to, I moved to New York City. I was in Philly. That's where I got my MFA at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts.
And they're very renowned, actually.
And I'm an okay painter, or I was an okay painter, and now I would say I'm far less than that, just because I haven't kept up with it.
Sure, it's practice.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just your chops on the canvas; it's how you think about things.
Yes,
and,
yes.
You have to think about and approach life as a painter to be a great painter, and I haven't done that for years and years. And actually, I have some, just as a side note, I'm going to start doing something I never did before, which was paint landscapes. Now all I want to do is like paint beautiful pictures of landscapes, whereas before I was trying to express myself and my feelings about the world and all this
I
stuff.
know.
That just, painting is not the medium anymore for that. But anyway, I moved to New York and I started working because towards the end of my education, I started getting into films and making films. And so I moved to New York. I started working for Warner Brothers there and doing sales videos for Warner Brothers and became kind of entrenched in the independent film scene in New York City for a long time. And then
That's artsy. That's very artsy. That's a few cigarettes and a few drinks.
yes, yes, indeed. And great when you're single, but that, I met a girl doing martial arts and I'm married to her to this day. We have 2 beautiful daughters and got me thinking like, well, how do I turn this into a living? And I started working in television and slowly watched my artistic integrity kind of leak out of me.
I know exactly how you feel. I've done a lot of what I call straight jobs, and I consider working in the movies and the costume department as a straight job. There's no creativity. It's mostly shopping. And lint rolling. I'm a professional lint roller, and I'm a professional rag picker. I pick up dirty clothes, and there's nothing artistic about that. People's like, oh, how creative. Not so much.
Yeah.
So you got into TV, which is the hardest work on film. You do a lot of work. It's a lot of work, TV.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was always cool. It was fun and interesting. I did a lot of stuff for, back when Discovery Channel had the military channel. I worked military channel for a long time. Not at the military channel, but a third party producer. We made programs for that. And, it was always kind of knife adjacent. I've always loved weapons and, airplanes and tanks and stuff, especially airplanes. If not knives, airplanes. But that's when, when I moved to New York, I started doing Jeet Kune Do and more importantly, Kali, Filipino Kali. So stick and knife fighting. And I was always really pretty good at that, better than boxing. I was pretty good at jujitsu, but really my thing was knife fighting, and that sort of kept, knife sparring. I never actually got in a knife fight, thank God.
You didn't get in a cage with a weapon? Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. But just the training, and that sort of kept my love of knives alive, and I slowly started acquiring more and more. Big into cold steel. Still today, I love cold steel,
Really?
but that was affordable stuff for me back then. And started learning more and more about, the players. And, I'm speaking with you, and I'm also aware that one of my, knife heroes is right on the other side of this computer.
Yeah.
Became aware of you, Bob, and just, your contribution and, I just started becoming a collector, even though I thought collectors were weird. I'm like, yes, collectors are weird types of folks. I'm not a collector. I just have tons of knives,
Yes. Well, that's how I am about some other things. I think my mother had a gift shop, and she sold some things that people collected. And I thought they were weird. And then I looked around my house a few years ago and I went, I'm pretty weird too. Because I have a collection of knives and I love knives. I mean, I love going to knife shows and picking up knives and opening them and closing them and seeing how the action is and the latest thing. And I certainly, without Bob, would never have been exposed to that. And then you walk around with a rock star at a show.
Yep.
And then there's all these, guys that are so, yes, sir. Oh, can I have your autograph? And he's like, what? I'm just a knife maker, That's not some guy, but he is some guy. And I'm very proud of him, actually. He didn't get here by doing nothing.
Well,
he worked hard.
You also have to understand, you might not be a rock star, Bob. You might not be a rock star to every single person out there, but to people like me, you absolutely are, and they're enthusiast markets and enthusiast, areas of enthusiasm are intense, and they feed on themselves. And I don't mean feed on themselves. They build their own energy is more what I mean.
Yeah.
And, there are, I have a short list of legends out there, and you're one of them.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think it's time to change the subject.
Absolutely.
It's kind of embarrassing here. It's getting very good.
Yeah, he gets, I don't know what. For someone who's not shy, he gets, when people start praising him, he sort of shrinks. I'm watching him shrink into his chair, sort of. So,
I mean, what are you supposed to say? Yes,
Well,
that's true.
yes, I'm great. Well,
I know.
yeah, exactly, Bob. Yeah, I'm wonderful.
I have a lot to be modest about.
Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah, right.
And there's other guys who are in his level who are not so modest, and they'll tell you. I was once next to someone at a knife show, a New York knife show, and he's told everyone that came to the table, and I will not mention names, but that he was the greatest knife maker in the world. And as soon as he would say that, I'd say after that, just ask him. And it didn't
that's
stop
so
him.
Ridiculous.
It didn't stop him. His ego was, and he makes beautiful knives, but his ego was, the biggest thing on the table. So Bob doesn't really have that so much.
If you hadn't heard.
Yeah, by the way. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so you're in TV, and I know you don't live in New York now. How did you come to where you are now?
So my wife and I, we lived in New York for 8 years together, and when we finally got married and my wife got pregnant with our first daughter, we moved to the suburbs of DC, where she grew up, so we could be around family. And
nice.
So mixed feelings still, even after 15 years here. Mixed feelings about the DC area, but it is where we've raised our family, and so that definitely, and it is beautiful. Virginia is a beautiful place.
It is. My brother used to live in Fairfax, Virginia.
That's where I live.
That's where. Oh my God. Yeah, I used to drive his Carmen Ghia. It was the first time I saw traffic circles. It was in Virginia, and he would get lost in traffic. He had no sense of direction. I have not a lot of sense of direction, but more than he did. And I drive his Carmen Ghia all around Virginia.
Carmen Ghia is such a cool car.
It is cool. I'm
You
big
don't
on
see
cool
them around
cars.
anymore.
But anyway, so you're there, and I understand moving to somewhere that are not your peeps, because I moved to Albuquerque from Chicago, and it took a while to make good friends, and we have a lot of good friends there that I met. And then we moved here, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not Lululemon. I'm not, I'm not going to get Botox shot in my face, and I couldn't find. And the knife world embraced us, but these are guys. They want. The reality is they want Bob. Yeah. And although I hear from some of them almost daily, they're still, their wives would not want us to go hang out one night. Okay, I don't think that would be okay. Not that I would do anything, but they want the Bob. Then that's okay. I get that. So recently with my comedy, I found my people here. We got screwed up childhoods. We got, we make fun of it. We joke about it. We crack each other up. We act like 5-year-olds, and that's pretty much my. I prefer the child's table.
The Comedy Store. I mean, that's amazing.
I know. I know. Well, I will be in a group show, but still, I'll have 10 minutes or something, 7 minutes. And that's where you start. And I still can't believe it. I just pinch myself. Someone just texted me. I just got a text about they saw my pictures. I had headshots done, and they saw my pictures. And how can they follow me? How can they from my headshot? I guess they were pretty funny headshots. But anyway, all right. So enough about me, as they say. So you're in Washington D.C. and you're in the same industry, right?
Yeah. But it's different here. It's not, it's a lot less entertainment based in DC. It's a lot of government work in this line of work. And so I've been at the same place for almost 14 years. And in doing so, I started producing podcasts and for someone else within my organization. And he became my friend. That's Jim, my producer of my show. And he's very interested in the production side. And he had been, studying up on podcast producing, and that's just an area of interest to him. And so he was like, well, Bob, I know you like knives, and we should do a knife podcast. I'm like, people don't want to hear a knife podcast. They want to see knives, they don't.
Apparently they do, Bob.
Apparently they do. And so one day I remember I was driving, I had to drive downtown into DC for an errand. And I was listening to this podcast that I begrudgingly would listen to because they covered interesting topics. But the two guys, I found them to be mealy-mouthed and a little, I don't know.
I know.
I just didn't care for they were kind of that, oh yeah, that's very interesting. But they talked
That
about
fresh
cool
air
science.
voice.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
I
how
remember
you doing?
thinking, like, if these dudes can do it,
Yeah.
Jim and I could do it. So
Yeah.
I called him up and I'm like, Jim, let's do it. Let's do a knife podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started, and he was a part of the on-air show, or on-air, you know what I mean? He was part of the recorded show.
And you started with video.
No, we did not.
Did
We
not?
started
Okay.
audio. I think our first 100 and some odd episodes were audio only.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it wasn't too long before Jim was like, my real value, because he doesn't know anything about knives, and I love just talking with him. He's my friend, but he was like, my value is off, in the back end and the tail end of the show. I'm gonna recuse myself from the show itself and produce, and it's up to you. And I was like, oh my God.
Just me. Yeah. I dragged Bob along because I couldn't do this alone.
Yeah, you will find that you actually probably can, but it's nice to have. I mean, it's nice to know that Jim is on the other side every time I'm doing it. He's in the studio, so to speak.
That's how I feel about Mateo, our engineer, being here.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So do you do it at your house though?
No, we do it remotely. So he's in his place about 20 miles from me, and we use this great platform. I'll tell you about it off air because I don't get money to advertise for them.
Okay.
But we do everything remotely, and we do work together. So I see him every Wednesday. We go out to lunch, and we don't work in the same, business line, but we go out to lunch together and scheme and such.
Plot taking over the real world.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay.
But really, it was like it was him saying, "You take the show completely." And I was like, what I really wanted to do was interview people, because I do that in my job already, and that's the best part of my job is
Right, the
interviewing
stories,
people.
right? That people tell you, it's fabulous.
I love it, and I love that. I wasn't always like this. I think that working at my current job and having this podcast has really brought this out in me. Like. And going to parties. I like to go to parties. So it's like meeting someone I've never met before and finding out about them. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me.
I love people, strangers. I used to annoy my daughter when she was a teenager and in their 20s, so that I would talk to a complete stranger and find out their life story.
Yeah.
And they always are so interesting to me, no matter whether they're like, I met a guy at a waiting room when Bob was having surgery who's a professional Santa Claus.
Oh my God.
And I said to him, I feel like I'm sitting
So
across
cool.
from Santa Claus. And so I said, I want to have you on the podcast, but we got to have you visually on the podcast because people have to get this. And he had all these stories about these kids doing stuff in malls to him. And he had me rolling on the floor. So, but I, like you, I love the people part of it. I love their stories. When I worked in film, I knew everybody, every actor I work with. Somebody said to me, what are you doing, an intake eval? I would do my social work intake eval and ask them all these questions because I was fascinated, and that's how I remember them. Remember their names? I don't know, but I can remember their stories. And so I'm glad you do that because you interview people and you're great interviewing. I mean, you did great with interviewing my Bob.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I was on your podcast, I think twice, wasn't it?
Yep. You were on twice.
It was an excellent interview. You really have a talent for digging out interesting stories from people.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, that's what I want. That's what I want because to me, it's interesting, like I said, to find out about people, but just in terms of like a personal pride thing, it makes me feel good. And, sometimes it's all about me, but it makes me feel good to know that people feel comfortable enough to talk. And, it's funny, you mentioned the Santa Claus in the waiting room. It's interesting how much you can get out of people that don't know you. How freeing it is to talk about your own self to people that don't know you, and it's kind of a relief. My wife and I have our like deepest conversations at the weirdest times. You know what I mean?
I had
It's
one
not,
with Bob in the grocery store once.
yeah, yeah. I mean, or yeah, right, exactly. We're both driving to work. We call about some sort of thing of the day. Oh, our daughter has volleyball. Make sure you blah blah blah, and then it turns into a. But those are few and far between. You know, how often do you have 1 hour long conversations with people that you know? It's rare. And so to meet someone new, especially, I mean, for me, it always comes back to the knives, especially someone who is creative, because that's how I came up, and that's what I've kind of centered my life around. But also creates these things that I'm oddly, obsessively collecting. You know, like I don't use them. I use a very slender percentage of the knives I have, but they are like, if I could collect paintings, I would do that too, because I like to look at them, I like to handle them, I like to touch them, just like knives, you know. So
We have a huge art collection. I've been
oh,
fortunate to teach printmaking all over the world and have traded with some of the most famous printmakers. We have our every wall is covered in our house. It's just unbelievably covered in our house. And people come in and they say to us, "This is like going to a museum."
oh, that is so
And
cool.
so and Bob and I recently where we watch television switched seats. So now I get to view the gallery floor to ceiling
Whoa.
wall of prints. So sometimes he thinks she's not listening to the TV. I'm probably not. But I'm looking at this print, seeing it from I hadn't noticed something about it or whatever. And it makes me so happy.
What you're doing there is you're living with it. It's different from looking at it. You know, you go to a gallery and you look at paintings, and that's awesome. But when you have something and it's on your wall and you look at it every day and you don't think about it, it's not like you stand there with, rubbing your beard and considering it all the time, but
When I
you
get a
walk
beard.
by it and you notice, like, yeah, sorry. I mean, I know you,
I'm joking. Go on. It was a
you're a
perfect
big luster.
punchline setup. Thank you.
But when you're living with something like that, you notice things that you would never notice unless you set up camp in the gallery itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where when I was painting, that's what I would do. I would hang stuff on the wall and live with it for a while and then finish it. Or sometimes not, and just imagine myself finishing it, because you move on. When you're creative, you build something or make something. And then you have maybe plans to perfect it, but then you move on, and then you look back and you're like, "Oh, my old work is so immature." Or,
Well, there's a lot of that self-critiquing, but someone said to me, a gallery that represented me years ago said, "Why don't you just paint? We can get so much more for paintings." I said, "No, I have to make 4 or 5 color plates that all register to do the same thing. That's way too easy for me to paint, which is not easy to paint. I am not a painter. I don't like cleaning brushes." Which is funny because I have to clean rollers all the time. So I don't know, but yeah. So all right, so you're in DC and you're working in TV and the more government job. Oh, those jobs, they get in the way of everything.
They're such a pain.
Anyway, and so you start the podcast, and for the first year, how many followers do you think you had?
Oh,
Audio only.
audio only. I don't know. Like for the first year, like maybe 2,000 or something.
Right. That's pretty good, though. That's pretty good. If they, I keep telling people, hit follow, please.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you went to the video, how did you set that up? Where did you set that up?
So that really blew up. We used a service. What the hell was it called? I can't remember what it was called, but it was audio only. And actually, I recently spoke with someone over it, and it's improved. But then Jim, my friend and producer, who is really, I credit him to making the show what it is on the technical side and what you see. He's always looking for new. Oh, check out this new service, and I'm always kind of like, yeah. What about the old one though?
Yeah, I know that one.
He's the innovator. So we tried out this new service, and it was audio only, but they had video in beta, so we could kind of check it out without having to commit. And we did that, and then after a while, it just became apparent. I was like, well, Jim, the reason I watch people's knife videos on YouTube is because I can sit there and look at the knives.
Right.
You can tell me all day long about your double-edged bayonet ground fighter, but unless I can see it, I'm not going to really get it.
Yeah.
And so we tried out the beta. The beta worked great, and that company kind of perfected or I don't want to say perfected, but made their video really robust very quickly, and it became the normal part of their service, and that's just how we continued. And I was also inspired by some of the podcasts that I watch on YouTube, like Joe Rogan podcast, which is the biggest in the world. But the thing that inspired me is that you can watch just two dudes sitting at a table talking, and it's interesting. Now, with a show like that, I can just as easily listen to it and find it just as interesting. But if you're talking about a specific material thing, like a knife, then you want to see it.
Yeah, you want to show and tell. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You want to show and tell. So I feel like once we went video, and I, even though we're on all of the audio platforms, to me it's still the video. Like, to me, I'm most concerned about YouTube.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's where I know that's where most people engage with the show. And that's work. Engage.
Yes.
Engage with the show. But that's where most people watch the damn show, is right there on YouTube.
Yep.
And for good reason. It's not only interesting to see the knives, but it's really interesting to see the people that make them.
And to see their facial expressions. If you're just listening, people could A, be in their pajamas, and B, they could have a big scar on their face or whatever. You wouldn't know any of that. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. In fact, I was a big radio kid. When I was a kid, I listened to all these radio shows. So I'm sure this is, hits the same nerve. And I watch a lot of comedy. And so 4 comedians are not actually doing anything, but I watch them look at each other. And I can tell by their faces if they think something's funny or they think something's stupid or whatever. So just adding that video component without show and tell of a product is more interesting to me. I used to only listen to them audio, and then one day I said, I got to do this video. So it takes more of my time. But I think that's the way to go. Video podcast. Joe Rogan just sits there and talks. He rarely does. He has somebody he's interviewing, but he's not showing and telling big products or anything. He's just sitting there talking, and he's doing it. Of course, he's a little more bold than I can be. I'm not sure I want to be as bold as he is. I don't have Joe Rogan's chops behind me. So anyway, so you're doing this, and you must have seen a huge uptake in people listening and watching.
Yeah, and simultaneously on the YouTube channel, I put up videos of knives. Well, first of all, we do an interview every Sunday, or it goes up every Sunday.
Yeah.
We do a show that goes up every Wednesday, which is 1 hour of me talking about new knives, new knives out in the world, new knives in my collection, and then I talk about a concept, like recently, asymmetrical double-edged fighters. What I mean by that is as opposed to daggers.
Yeah.
I love them both, but I have a real soft spot in my heart for fighting knives, non-dagger.
Bob's nodding his head right now.
Yes.
He's nodding.
He knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, I agree.
So I do a show like that every Wednesday. And then on Thursday night from 10 to 12 Eastern Standard Time, I do Thursday Night Knives. We do, because Jim is a huge part of it, because he's a huge part of everything. But he's producing it live, and I know he thinks that's fun. But also I'm engaging with, I'm talking with commenters, my, people who view my stuff. And it's so much fun. It's basically 2 hours of me talking. But, half of that are the comments.
Yeah.
So I'm reading out what the comments are asking me or talking to me about, and then I'm answering them. And I swear, when we're done, I feel like I've been at a party, basically.
Yes,
I've been talking with all these people. Hey, dude, hey, how's it going? And oh yeah, I think that's a great one. And no, I wouldn't waste my time with that or whatever. we're talking about. But yeah, I love it. And it's different from the interviews. I take the interviews very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wednesday show, it's just me talking. So I better not be, I construct a run of show that's pretty tight.
Mm-hmm.
But on Thursday Night Knives, I have a general concept of what we're going to talk about. And that's it. And it's so nice and freeing. So
Well,
we do
live
3 shows
is
a week.
great. Yeah, live is great.
Yeah.
In fact, you're seeing more live. Netflix does John Mulaney live in LA.
He's so funny.
And he's so funny. He's so funny. They don't realize, how brilliant. I don't think people realize how brilliant John Mulaney is. Another Chicago boy.
Oh, yeah.
He's amazing. And I don't know that everybody's into live. They're not used to live. They're used to watching videos, this generation. There are a lot of live shows. Well, Saturday Night Live is one of them that's still going. But even that's a little less live. It's got a delay. Anyway, I wanted to ask you something that we ran into because they're knives. And we were censored on Instagram and Facebook. And we had to change our website because the payment people at Stripe and whatever would not deal with us because we were weapons makers. Even Bob's book, they didn't want us to sell.
Oh.
And so we had to change the name, our business name, to Terzawola Design, and no tactical anymore. The knife is the book is how to make a tactical knife, which I'm not going to get around. I'm not renaming the book.
Yeah.
But have you had any problems with that being on YouTube or the like? Have you run into that?
I knock on wood, and I'm knocking on wood right now. I have not had that issue, but pretty much all of my peers have so far in one way or another. Now, where I've seen it most is on Instagram, and I was active on Instagram for a while, but I haven't been in a few years. And, for me, it's an issue because, yes, I am not out there getting in fights or being violent, but my favorite kind of knives are fighting knives, tactical knives, and I've done a lot of that kind of training. And so I like to talk about it. It's interesting to me. And I have, people like Michael Janich on and other kind of combatives experts. And I try not to shy away from the topic at hand. Sometimes it's hard not to because you start to worry, but I have not had that issue, thankfully.
Good to
but
know.
also, I think that's because I'm also not selling a good. And I think you might run into that more when you are, an actual maker and selling the thing.
Yeah. Well, just your name, Knife Junkie, I would think the AI bots would pick up on that. I found that on Instagram, if I do a video and I keep it moving and it's not focused on the knife so much, it's just, the knife will be in Bob's hand or what he's working on, and recently I did some reels where I sort of glued together a bunch of still pictures from a new knife we have coming out.
Ooh.
And I checked this morning and there were 4,000 views. And so that didn't get buried is my point.
Yeah.
Some things there have been 100,000 views, but if I can get 2,000 or 3,000 views without the bots shutting us down, I feel successful.
Well, Suze, sometimes I wonder about because I'm not extremely vigilant, I must admit, at like keeping up with my performance on YouTube and on Instagram, but more on YouTube, because I feel for 2 reasons. One, I just kind of, I don't know, it's a distraction to me, and it's just not my predilection to just like, how many views did I have today? I mean, I do check in, but sometimes I wonder, like, shouldn't I've been doing this almost 6 years, like. Shouldn't there be, like, I've seen other people like race ahead of me and in terms of subscribers and stuff. And then I'm like, then I think about it. I'm like, well, these guys show off every new knife that comes out and they have great insight into that. That's not my thing. And I think that's where most people, even I consume that stuff a lot. Like, oh, what's the new one from Civivi? Oh, what's the new one from Hinderer or whatever. Sometimes I wonder, like, if there's you can't help but wonder, am I shadow banned? I should be up to like 500,000 followers at this point. And whenever I find myself thinking that, I'm like, okay, that's ego. All right, drop that.
Right, that's ego, exactly. And you know what? You have an attention span, and not a lot of people have attention span. And I find that
Yep.
some of the channels where there is absolutely no attention span required, those do the best because the younger folk, as you know, I'm not, are used to 5 seconds. I have these managers who have shared with me that, you got to hook them in 5 seconds. If you don't, they're going to move on to the next video. And Matteo is nodding his head. And he knows, we were at a meeting together and Matteo was making some suggestions about, oh, that would be great video content for X, Y, or Z. And, he knows better than we know. And so I see a lot of that. There's a lot of flash in the pan, people
Yep.
build it up and then they get tired of it or bored with it. But, well, that's good to know that you haven't been shadow banned. We've been told to get off of every media platform when we were Terzwola Tactical. And now that we're Terzwola Design, they don't know what that is. So,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
That's such a bummer though, man.
yeah,
It's like it's so arbitrary in a way.
it is. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit where people can find you. I mean, everyone in the knife world probably knows you, but a lot of my followers are not. The funny thing is about my followers, Bob, is I've always hung out with the boys my whole life. I was a tomboy. I worked in an industry that even though I was in wardrobe, I hung out with the guys, the camera crew, and those are my buds. I was never friends with the vanities so much. Sorry, vanity girls, but they're mean. And in the knife world, I like being with all the guys, and it's no surprise that my audience is 78% men and not women, and male comics as well. So, so a lot of the people that follow us might not know about you. So I want you to talk about where they can find you. Give us, as I call it, your digits.
My digits.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to listen, you can go to any of the podcast apps. We're pretty much on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The Knife Junkie. It's with so it's The Knife Junkie, and it's
Mm-hmm.
IE. And
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, if you want the real goods, I always say go to YouTube. But you can't always be watching YouTube. Sometimes you're mowing the lawn or washing the dishes or driving to work.
The
So
driving, that doesn't stop people from watching videos,
yeah,
I
isn't
see.
that crazy? Oh my
Mm-hmm.
God. How's your phone? Yeah, it's not like I don't yell that out
Yeah. Yeah,
into traffic.
exactly. Oh,
like
yeah. I go
crazy.
nuts when I see that's one of my triggers. I see somebody watching a video driving a car, and I'm like,
Yeah.
pick one,
Yeah.
drive or watch. Okay,
Hello.
so on YouTube, you're the Knife Junkie, yes?
Yep. Yeah. YouTube, and I've interviewed a lot of. I consider my digits part of this is part like I've interviewed Bob, Lynn
Mm-hmm.
Thompson, Ernest Emerson. I've had Alan Elishewitz on the show, Ken Onion, Greg Lightfoot, Peter Carey, all these great guys, like
Mm-hmm.
the legends, and then some of the new guys, Dirk
Yeah.
Pinkerton, Andrew
Mm-hmm.
Demko, Tim Kell, Richard
Mm-hmm.
Rogers, and we sit down and you see all sorts of personality types that
Yes.
go into making these things that
Yeah.
we all love.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is very interesting. You have everything from the soft-spoken, sensitive artist type to the boisterous, lots of former Marines, and with their gallows humor.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it is just, I love doing this. So yeah, check it out on YouTube, any of the podcast apps, and yeah, that's where you
Yeah,
find
and
me.
if you want to get you a PCU Live, that's Thursday nights. And you had our merch czar on, Ben, with the coin that we just produced, which I think
What
you
a-
have one, right?
Yeah, I'm holding it in my hand as we speak.
Okay.
5 millimeters thick of this beautiful naval brass
Yeah.
with incredible engraving on it. I can't get over how detailed the wings of the dragon are.
I know. And then on the
Insane.
side of the coin, that was Bob's idea around the rim of the coin
Seriously
to
cool.
put that, and nobody's done that. So, and these aren't like challenge coins you're just going to hand out. They
No.
cost us a lot to produce, and
Yeah.
we do them really for Bob's biggest fans. This is the merch is just for the fans. It's probably not that's not where we make money. And then people think, oh, they're selling all this merch. Well, really, you got to produce it and ship it and and so.
Well, when I had Ben on Thursday Night Knives, I was very clear. This is not a challenge coin. I get,
Mm-hmm.
and I like challenge coins. Don't get me wrong, but I
Yeah.
get them handed to me, very nonchalantly. This is
Mm-hmm.
a very different kind of. This feels like a real valuable, you know.
Yeah, it feels like a
And it
paperweight.
is.
That's what I told Ben.
Yeah.
Anyway, will you be at Blade Show in Atlanta?
I will indeed. That's
Okay.
that's one of my favorite times of year. I get to shake the hands of the people I've interviewed over the year and see old friends. Yeah,
Okay.
I
We'll
will
be there.
Will you
And
guys
Ben
be
will,
there?
yeah, and Ben will be there also with us, so everybody gets to meet the
Right.
merch star. We won't have a table. You know, Bob will be scooting around, having people, as I say, kiss the hems of his garments. And
Holding court wherever he stops.
yes, and signing blades. He
I'm going
brings
to have to go out and get some garments that have hems on them, actually.
anyway, and I'll be probably on Friday. I won't be at the show. I'll be with my. It just so happens my management team is in Marietta, and I
how
might
cool.
go perform in a club there one of the nights, but I don't know yet. They've got. I would be a featured person. I'm trying to figure out how to do this at a knife show sometime. I would love to perform in front of the Knife Guys. Got a whole bit about Knife Guys. You know, I have a lot of things. You know, because Knife Guys take apart knives.
I would imagine it's there for the asking.
Yes.
I think if you set it up for next year, you could have a packed room.
Yeah, that would be fun. So maybe I'll do that. Anyway, all right. Well, we're about out of time, but you've been so generous, and I'm so impressed with what you've done with your
Thank
podcasts that are just, you know, you're not Joe Rogan, and you've done it from the ground up, and so there's a lot to be said for that. And now I know a little bit more about you. You know, a Midwestern MFA, which Ben, by the way, has an MFA in painting.
Oh,
See, I hired him. All these other knife guys wanted a job, but they couldn't write or read to save their lives. And I know if he got an MFA, he had to write and read, not just paint. So, and we love him. We love him. And another Italian, you know, what can I say?
that's right. Great
That
guy.
wasn't a requirement, but it was a nice add-on. So,
Good,
all right.
good perk.
So hope to see you at Blade. Maybe we could make a thing to go out to dinner or something one night.
That would
if you
be
want
awesome.
to.
That'd be nice,
great.
yeah.
I'd love that. All right, everybody. We're at the end of our thing. You want to say anything else, Bob?
I just want to say goodbye. Arrivederci. Thank you for coming on, Bob. We really appreciate it.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you both very
Yes.
much.
Thanks for joining us, Bob. Two Bobs, no waiting. Bye for now, guys. Thanks for listening. If you like what you're hearing, please share this with a friend and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Support our efforts through Patreon at TheKnifeWife, and for all Terzawola goodness, go to terzawola.net. And remember, if you're not laughing, you're not living. Comments and questions can be made on Instagram at The KnifeWife Podcast or our Facebook group, The KnifeWife Podcast. And if you're a couple who work together and would like to be on our podcast, tell us about yourself with an email at eccentricsuze.com or terzawola.net.